If you have something metallic in your drawing, you might be wondering, how do I make it look all shiny and reflective the way it does here? So I've gone ahead and I've laid it out, and I just did a nice line drawing. And then I took my 2H pencil and I looked and I really thought, okay, is there any spot where it's white? So I made sure that I kind of drew little spots where I wanted it to be white. There's only a few spots, but there's a couple white shapes where I really want to maintain the whiteness. This edge here, this edge here, this edge here, it kind of flares out this area. So I went in, and when I shaded with my 2H, I left those areas alone. I kept them white and I did not touch them. Then I could take, now that I've done my 2H layer, so I've done a nice light layer of 2H everywhere, and you can see that in some areas I've started to take my HB pencil or even my 4B pencil, and I started to shade. So I'm gonna grab my 4B pencil, and now I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna start to look at the different areas. So, if I'm looking really any area, I'm looking, where does it go from medium, a little bit darker, back to medium? So what are these zones? And they just kind of fade into each other. But I might just subtly push the values a little bit darker. I can always add more later if I make it too dark or too light. But if I make it too dark, that's really hard. So I want to be careful to stray, be a little bit lighter than I think. And I can always make it darker later. But I'm just going in and I'm adding some of these shapes now with my value. Now I grabbed my wrong one. I should grab my 4B. I think that'll work a little bit better for what I need to do. And I can kind of make these little marks and start to push my values a little bit darker as I'm going in. And as I'm going, I'm not afraid to push. Now, the thing you'll notice is when you start to push and it doesn't get as dark as you want, then that means it's time to upgrade to a new pencil. So then I just switch to my 4B. That way I can get in here and I can really get some of these deep dark values that I need to get as I go in there. Looking in here, you'll notice too, there is kind of an interesting thing where when you shade, it almost feels like lines. They're almost like these columns. So I might go in, and I might do some up and down kind of lines. And then I get to here, you see it really wants to get dark again. So I'm just pressing down with different pressures to try to kind of copy this little line, and then it lightens. So it's kind of dark, medium, light again. So dark, medium, let it be light, medium, let it be light again, and kind of skipped over. So I'm just looking in each section. Now some areas what's really gonna help is if I go in then and I really kind of work on that dark black edge separating. And then I can go in and I can just kind of thicken that edge as I need to. But that edge exists everywhere. So the thing with metallic is you have to be okay to let it be dark when it needs to be dark. And then maybe I'm going to work on this area a little bit. So I see it kind of lines up a little bit below here. So I'm going to leave that little white edge right there alone. So I'm not going to shade all the way to the edge of it. I'm going to come into this side, and then I'm going to gradually fade it up and out. And then if I go on the other side and do that as well, it'll kind of merge it. Now here, I don't see as much of that white edge, so I don't need to worry about it as much. But then it kind of comes back right here. So I'm gonna do in this shape. I kind of have this little rectangle, so I'm shading it in here. And then skipping it a little bit where I got that glare, and then picking it back up a little bit further along on my little rim. And if I'm really paying attention, I can see it gets a little bit darker here in the middle. then lightens back up as I go. And again, I'm doing my little overlapping circle. So, that's it. I'm just, as I kind of really look for these sections of where it's light, where it's dark, light, if I'm trying to lead those sections. And again, if I do a little too much, I can try to lift it away a little bit with the eraser to lighten it back up if I need to. But I want to try to avoid erasing very much and really instead focus on, did I put my values down lightly so that then later I can darken them slowly as I need to go. But then I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna do my next edge, and I won't make you watch all of it. I'll cut away at the end. I'll skip ahead to when it's finished so you can see what the finished product looks like. But that's how I go in and I start to make things look nice and light. Look for where there's these sort of stripes of highlights, and see, are you putting those in to your artwork? Are you leaving those highlights and those shadows alone so they can exist in your artwork? But also don't obliterate these little light highlights that go around the edges. So look and see, where's it light? I mean, metallic is where you really have to be looking and trying to match value. But if you do it carefully, you'll get really good end products of really just paying attention to where does it get light, where is it medium, where is it dark. If I leave those shapes alone, it's gonna start to look nice and shiny and look pretty cool. Okay, that's it. I'll skip ahead to the end. I said I'd come back when it was finished. Here we go. I am now even going in with my 6B a little bit to drive my values even darker in some places. So don't be afraid to get dark near the end. I only need it in a few spots, but that could even amplify how shiny it looks. If I have a few spots where it gets kind of dark. Yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I think, when you go from light to dark and back, you have these kind of chunks of value that I'm trying to match them, and you try to find these highlights and leave them alone, then you can get something that looks pretty close to metallic. So take your time. This probably took me about 12 to 15 minutes, which is a decent chunk of time, but I was really, really focused. And if you take the time to really analyze your values, I think you'll get something you're really happy with.